You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. So on Monday, December 1st, the Salisbury City Council had a closed session, and this was done to select a new candidate for District 2 that was vacated by Deshaun Dowdy's resignation. In the studio to discuss this process is Dr. Joe Venosa from Salisbury. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Mr. Joe Scafino from Salisbury. Thanks for coming out.
Yep.
So, gentlemen, we weren't at this meeting because it wasn't open, which I think is maybe a little bit of the problem because we're finding out the information through our sources, through social media, and through some upheaval with some folks who are not happy about how this has gone down. Joe, I want to ask you, a lot to cover, but no video footage, right?
And yet the story still comes out within 24 hours. And this is the irony. You could have all the closed sessions that you want in this day and age.
Yeah. Why not just go and be transparent?
Why not just be transparent?
Yeah. Joe, you talked about at the Salisbury City Council meeting a week ago about who's your enemy today could be your ally tomorrow. Yeah. We don't even really know publicly. We know who the 5 candidates were, right, but we don't. It wasn't a public discussion. So, how do you feel about this whole process?
I call it a sham. I mean, the public has no inkling of what went down, of who these people are. It should have been an introduction to all 5, and they can the public can make up its own mind, however the council votes, but at least they would have an understanding and see what's going on. But the way it's gone down.
Well, what I want to do, I want to have this in 2 segments. I want to have the first segment where we talk about what we do know. Mm-hmm. And then I want to take a break and then come back and then talk about maybe what we would like to see in the future. Because it's one thing to identify a problem, but let's identify a solution to the problem.
Exactly.
So, yeah, great.
So stay with us. When we come back, we're going to break down what we do know about the closed session meeting for Salisbury City Council. Welcome back to Open Agenda. Continuing in the studio with us today is Dr. Joe Venosa. Thanks for sticking around.
Thank you.
Mr. Joe Scafino, thanks for sticking around.
We got the 3 Joes.
Once again.
My joke, yeah.
So yesterday, the city of Salisbury, they did not have an open work session or legislative session, but they did have a closed session. And this session, we know, was to interview and get to a point that they could appoint a new candidate for Deshaun Dowdy's spot, District 2. Joe, I want to talk, what do we know? Because a lot of this is leaked out through social media and through some of our sources, but we do know there was 5 applicants, right?
Yes. So, and just for clarity on the process, essentially what happens is you have a person who hopefully actually lives in the district who applies. They submit an application. They sometimes get letters of support. And depending on if those qualifications are met, then they go before the rest of the council in a closed session where they actually have an interview process.
Okay.
Now, ultimately, according to our charter, and this is where it gets interesting, is only the city council can appoint, which means the mayor doesn't have any role in that. There's no variation on, there's no caveat for if there's a tie. All right, and this kind of leads to the issue that we're going to probably get into.
4 current county council members.
Correct.
So you need a 3-1 or a 4-0.
You got to break the impasse.
Okay.
And that's part of the issue.
Well,
yeah.
Let's talk about the 5 people who did apply.
Sure.
We know Sean Jester and Wayne King were applicants. Mm-hmm. We know that Jermichael Mitchell, and we've had him on the show, very active in the community. He was an applicant. Mm-hmm. And he stated on social media, he's talked about his application. Mm-hmm. And Melissa Holland, and she used to work for the Wycomico County Council at one time.
That's my understanding.
Yeah. And Natalie St. Fard, right? And Natalie has been out on social media talking about how she's put in for an application as well. So any of these folks have history with the Salisbury City Council?
It's my understanding that Wayne King, I believe, had put in for District 2 before.
He was a candidate.
Well, he was a candidate for mayor in 2019 against Jake Day, and then he put in 2023, I believe, for the seat that Deshaun Dowdy ultimately got when he was first appointed.
Okay.
So he was no stranger to the process. And, of course, Jermichael Mitchell has run for mayor before. and is, as you said, very well known in the community. So, and Sean Jester, who is involved in politics, but I don't believe he's ever run for office or has been appointed to anything prior.
Now, ultimately, in a way, what they're really deciding is who is going to have control of the city council from a president's standpoint. And we have two different sides of this. We have Angela Blake and Michelle Gregory on one side, who were supporters with Deshaun Dowdy. Deshaun was the president before he resigned for not living in Salisbury anymore. And Angela Blake was his vice president. She's been running the meetings since he resigned. We know Michelle Gregory has come out and said before at the time she was going to run for county executive, and now she's not. But that was kind of one grouping on the Salisbury City Council. And on the other side, we've had April Jackson and Sharon DeShiel.
Correct.
So based off who gets approved is really going to decide who's going to get elected the next president and vice president, right?
Yeah, and that's part of the problem, I would say, is that you end up having candidates, at least in this context, where there's sort of two factions, and it's deadlocked at 2-2. It's really it's a vote not for maybe who is the most qualified or who is the most active in the community. It's who can play the kingmaker for that third vote. Not just on who becomes the president or vice president, but also who pushes bills through.
Yeah.
Because right now, and this is something that has to be said, the city council has been remarkably inactive at pushing any kind of legislation. This is the thing that I've been very critical of, and others is, they've talked for years about an affordable housing ordinance, something that every other municipality in the state has. They've never pushed it. Part of that, I think, is because of the influence of the developers on some of them. Part of it, I think, is just also that there's just a general incompetence with some of these council members.
Well, I mean, when I go to view the Salisbury City Council for when we're editing the show, for instance, it's frustrating for me, and I'm not a Salisbury resident or a city taxpayer, that they bring up an item in work session. Let's talk about affordable housing. And that was actually one of our goals this week, was to cover some of that. That's what's been coming up lately. They get done with the work session like, well, we need to talk about this more.
Yeah.
You're talking about this this fifth council person is going to be able to kind of help shape what direction those policies go, right?
Correct, yeah.
So at the end of the day, they had interviews and a closed session to have discussion. And our understanding is that Melissa Holland has been selected.
Correct. Now again, and I don't know anything about Miss Holland. For all I know, maybe she was legitimately the most qualified person. I think others have said that they didn't really know anything about her involvement in the community, and I think that was one critique. But here's the broader concern, and I'm going to let Mr. Jermichael Mitchell speak on this later in the week, because he's certainly going to talk about it at the upcoming council meeting, and I believe he's even going to do a live stream. But he's talking about the fact that the process of how the interviews were conducted, the comments of some council members during the previous week, kind of let people know that they were not going to vote for certain people ahead of time. And I think that's a pretty big problem in this process, is when you have members who are already, taking a position before the interview happens, purely based on what you said, which is who can be the third vote on the council.
Well, especially without the public's ability to view this. And Joe, I'm going to ask you, when you go to Salisbury City Council, you have spoken about affordability issues and development issues, even just other policies. At the end of the day, there's a transparent window there, whether you agree with what they're doing or not. You didn't get that here. How do you feel about how this process went from your perspective?
It was a sham, in my opinion. As Joe mentioned, it's 2-2, and there's nothing in the charter to break a tie,
right?
A deadlock. And that's something that absolutely should be addressed by the next council.
Yeah.
Whether it's the mayor, which makes sense.
Yeah. And not only that, it's my understanding that the council specifically forbade anyone from the mayor's office at sitting in on the meeting. Now, that is up to the discretion of the council to allow that or not. But for example, it's also my understanding that the mayor's office basically allowed council members to be on the hiring committee that hired the new city manager.
Okay.
But on the other hand,
Reciprocity wasn't there.
reciprocity, at least from my understanding, particularly Angela Blake's perspective, was that she wasn't going to allow that, and I think that's again okay. You can be political adversaries. You can have totally different views, but you should always support maximum transparency.
Well, it's something I mentioned at the council meeting. Today's political opponents could be tomorrow's political ally. So you don't personally attack someone, and we've seen that at council where Michelle Gregory and Angela Blake have continually, every opportunity, they've attacked the mayor, and the mayor, to his credit, keeps his cool. I mean, he doesn't lower himself to their level.
He has fought back, but at the same time, in a
diplomatically, yeah.
Well, and again, just for clarification, it's important too that we have to understand that these fights are not inherently partisan either, right? April Jackson's a Democrat.
Oh, absolutely.
Jermichael Mitchell, Democrat. Yep. It's my understanding that they were dead set against, and specifically what I mean is Michelle Gregory and Andrew Blake were dead set against Jermichael Mitchell because, again, it's my understanding that he was not going to be a rubber stamp for their for their agenda, and that they were kind of, I guess, angry that there were issues of common ground that he and the mayor and the other members agreed on, which you would hope for in a supposedly nonpartisan city government. And what's ironic is that Ms. Gregory and Mr. Mitchell were both on the Democratic Central Committee together not too long ago.
And we had always had a saying back in Pennsylvania, when you're on council, you're not a Republican, you're not a Democrat. You're a Salisbury First Party. And we don't have that here.
No.
Well, and we have seen that in other council meetings where there has been a faction. I mean, whether it's Sharon DeShield doing a presentation on housing affordability and then there's really no discussion. They just move on.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about parking spaces and where does the mayor park?
Right. Well, and to your point, I remember something that Councilman Dave Ennis said to me not too long ago. He said, when you watch at least from we were talking about the county council meeting, but I think this applies to all venues. He says, when you watch a council meeting, you really shouldn't be able to tell the party of the person because A, a lot of the issues that you're dealing with are not inherently partisan.
Exactly.
And B, you represent everybody, regardless of whatever letter is next to your name. At least you should. Yeah. And I think some people, particularly on the city council, because they tend to live in an echo chamber online and because they maybe have never had political competition, they kind of they get high on their own supply, so to speak, of political rhetoric.
Yeah. Well, so the most likely outcome here is because someone that Angela Blake and Michelle Gregory have supported, it's probably going to continue to be the Salisbury City Council president is probably going to run through those two ladies, wouldn't you say?
I suspect, and again, I don't know anything about Miss Holland and her and in terms of her stance on issues, but I have to think that the reason why ultimately she got the vote, at least from Angela Blake and Michelle Gregory, is because they felt that they could influence her to vote for Angela as the new president. I mean, I think that's pretty clear.
All right, so then the voting for the next president of the Salisbury City Council, that's going to be done in open session.
It will. It'll be done on the 8th.
Okay, so the next meeting is Monday, December 8th, 6 o'clock.
Yes.
Government Office Building.
And I believe several people from the community, including Jermichael Mitchell and a few others, I mean, I'm planning to speak too, are going to talk about the process and about some of the concerns that we have in the public about the lack of transparency.
Yeah. At the Monday, December 8th meeting, there will be a legislative session and a work session, but they will have to elect new officers in the open legislative session. Correct?
Yes.
All right. And I want to take a break. When we come back, you have some experience, Joe, in this process. And I want to dig down, not for folks to really rehash everything that's happened here this week, but to understand what the process is going forward and maybe what changes the public should be asking for.
Sure. Great.
So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. Gentlemen, thanks for sticking around. And Dr. Joe Venosa, I want to ask you specifically about your experience back in 2023 with applying to fill in a role for a vacated city council seat.
Yeah. So in early 2023, in District 3, which is where I live, which is currently represented by Sharon DeShield, there was a vacancy. And what essentially happened was there were 4 people who applied for that vacancy in the district. It was and again, much like now, it was, there were 4 people on the council hoping to get that 5th seat, and they put out a notice, and we applied. I had my CV. I asked a few people in the community if I could, if they could be my references and all that, so they had to vouch for me. God help them. And then they set up an interview.
Okay. So what was the interview like?
Well, that's I think what concerns me the most is I have this distinct memory of sitting in the the little lobby outside of the city council chambers, which we often are at if there's an overflow, in a crowded evening for a meeting. And they were calling people, one at a time in. And I remember there was a moment waiting for the interview process where somebody who I knew who was affiliated in city government, they didn't work directly as the clerk or for the clerk, but they were sort of tangentially employed in that part of city government. And they sort of made the offhand comment, like, well, good luck, but they've already chosen Megan.
No.
And it really...
Well, that stinks.
It does. And at the time, I was pretty ignorant of that and didn't really know the full picture. But, in hindsight, I found it interesting that during my interview, there were very few questions about the actual, what would you bring to city government? It was literally, I'll never forget Michelle Gregory asked, what are your extracurricular activities? And I was like, well, I play in a band, whatever. I read books, things like that. But, as the interview went on, it kind of confirmed to me, it was like, okay, this clearly is sort of just going through the motions. And I've been on hiring committees before where, you get a sense of who might be a serious candidate and who's not.
Yeah.
But you always do your due diligence. You always ask the same questions, and you always stick to the issue of why you want them on the council. And knowing that Angela Blake and Michelle Gregory were very affiliated with Sure Progress and the political machine that Miss Outen and Jared Scheiblein are kind of tied to, I think explains some of perhaps that pre-decided decision-making. And it kind of left a really bad taste in my mouth because it kind of showed you that people don't really seem, at least from my experience, seem to go into it with the best intentions, right? That the people that are behind the table are not really picking the person who might be the best or most qualified or representative of the community, but they're looking for somebody who they either will be socially kind of acceptable, a friend, or they will do their bidding on a particular agenda.
Well, Joe, I want to ask you, you served on councils before. You've been in elected office, or in elected office. Right. Have you ever been in a position where you've had to fill a vacant seat?
Yes.
And you mentioned in the last segment about, you got to take your political party hat off. How did you find that you were able to do that when you were looking to fill this vacant seat back in Pennsylvania?
We were, even though we had different parties on the council, we were all Percy first. And in general, we were looking for a qualified candidate. So we wanted to know qualifications. We didn't ask about hobbies. All right. Yeah. What do you bring to the table? Involvement in the community. So we certainly wanted the best qualified people. And, just like with the city council, there's a concern with the new planning commission that, that process, some active people, Mike Langford comes to all the city council meetings. Mm-hmm. He wasn't chosen for the planning commission. Now, here's somebody who's involved, who knows the issues, and I think he wasn't chosen because he was publicly against the density thing. Yeah. So, again, it's the most qualified person wasn't. There's one example.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, I think when these people are appointed, especially if it's in a period of time where there's some big decisions to be made and there's some high stakes votes, I think often they default to people who are going to be the loyalist meaning the loyalist to other council members or those constituencies rather than their community. Because that summer, 2023, there were several big votes and closed meetings that happened that I know Miss Outen supported, that I think a lot of us would say were against the public interest and public transparency, and now the city's in court because of it.
And a lot of these closed sessions, I mean, Bob Taylor gets up there all the time. A lot of these closed sessions are not required to be closed. They really should be open.
Yes.
And the one time, I think it was Richard Mugg filed a PIA, and the council got reprimanded. Said that should not have been open. And I think if we did that more often, it would happen more. You know, these closed sessions, that interview for the council seat should have been open.
Well, and that's actually something that I think we need to steer the conversation toward in the future. And I think this is something that Jermichael Mitchell and maybe some other people might say this next week is, you know, if you're going to have people that are going to represent the public, right, in a council seat, you should have a public forum to at least allow the public to see them and to hear their case. Now, maybe the final vote has to be done in private, although I actually think it should be done in public as well. We had that experience in 2020 after Bob Culver died, and there was several candidates that put their name forth for county executive.
That was a debacle for months.
It was a debacle, and it was maybe not the prettiest, most sort of scripted moment, but you know what? That's the most honest form of government, is that when you see it out in the public.
Yeah. Well, is that maybe Jermichael's biggest weakness is, and I say weakness, it's actually to me a strength, is he's in a leadership capacity in everything he does in the community. I mean, my involvement with him isn't from a political standpoint, it's with youth sports. We do different programming in different parts of the county, but I love how he's a take charge type of person. Is it that strong of a personality that sometimes doesn't speak to other politicos because they really just want this?
It's threatening.
It's when somebody has their own mind and is not bound by certain loyalties of either party or social convention, I think that's dangerous to the status quo. I mean, look, and again, I want to be clear on this because I was initially on Megan Outen's campaign when she ran for mayor. You know, I remember distinctly that there were discussions about Jermichael not, quote, towing the line. And no one ever defined what the line was. But it was just, in that case, you know, I think he represented the kind of people that some of these career politicians don't like. Somebody who is...
Well, what if we at some point had a council, whether it's a city council or county council or Percy Town Council, that had a group of people who were similar to Jermichael, that were principled and would argue and fight over that. This wasn't about backroom dealings and placating, whether it's a developer or an environmental group or whoever. I'm not out there advocating for people to vote for Jermichael. My involvement with him has always been pleasant. I just like the fact that there is this level of you've got to fight it out a little bit with decorum in public.
Well, I mean, from my previous experience on council, one of the shocking things here, and I'm going to go back to the density amendment. When I was on council, we discussed, you knew where all 7 people stood. I'm sorry, 9. We had 9 on that, 3 per ward.
Big government.
So, but you knew where everybody stood. Everybody defended the vote. That density amendment, we had cowards on that council. Sharon was the only one who said why she voted against it. And we had the Department of Infrastructure and Development, their own department employees had a whole bunch of reasons we have problems. Nobody had the guts to say why they disagreed with that. And that's a transparency issue again.
And that goes back to this issue about who they choose and who they don't choose. I think everybody on that council should publicly say why they're in favor of somebody and why they're not in favor. Now, we got to be honest. There were a couple of people on that list who never had a chance, either from personal history or, let's be honest, from just partisan leanings. Okay, you should say that. You should say that. Michelle Gregory should say, I'm not in favor of Wayne King because of reasons X, Y, and Z, or Jermichael Mitchell, or whoever. And listen, for all we know, maybe Melissa Holland is the best qualified person, but I will say this. I know a lot of people in District 2, and nobody has ever really known of her involved in the community to the extent like somebody like a Jermichael Mitchell. Now, this is a personal bias that I have, but I think that matters. I think you should pick people that are both qualified, that are representative of the district and that are known for what they do.
Well, to your point, I'm not sure I want to say why I'm not voting for someone, because that can, I'd rather say I'm voting for this person because I believe they're best qualified because they're involved in the community, youth sports.
Yeah.
They come to the meetings, they're up on the issues,
Yeah.
and I think, in my opinion, they're best qualified without knocking down the other candidates.
No, well, I don't think you have to knock them down,
Right.
but I think if somebody asks, well, why didn't you vote for that person? You could say, well, I don't think they're qualified because of these reasons, meaning, I mean, you're absolutely right. You always want to accentuate the positive things.
Yeah.
I get it. Okay. But when asked, when challenged, I think you also should say, well, here's why I didn't vote for the other person. I mean,
yeah, that's fine.
I
don't know if that should be publicly or on the side.
It's a highly debatable thing because then you're getting into personal matters.
That's it.
But I do think, regardless, the public should have a right to hear every candidate.
Absolutely.
I mean, and I think it was Jermichael who did mention this, and there's other people who've brought up too. Just have a forum, get all the candidates in the same room, do a question and answer. Yeah. Hey, what do you think about this issue? What's the most pressing issue for District 2? What do you think, Melissa? What do you think, Jermichael? What do you think, whoever? Why do we not do active way?
What should the public be asking? I mean, so Monday, December 8th, 6 o'clock's next meeting.
Yeah.
You're talking about there's folks who are going to go and talk in the public comment sections. This is going to come up again. I mean, this is our fourth one in the last several years now, correct?
I believe it's the third one in 3 years.
Third one in 3 years.
But it has happened prior. I mean, it tends to happen every 2 or 3 years.
So, okay, let's look for some solutions to keep this from being the same issue.
Sure. Well, again, one, I think you have to have some kind of public, transparent process to get the community to know who's actually putting in. Because everybody should know. Like those 5 names that we've been mentioning, people should know that ahead of time. They should be widely known, and you should have the ability to go and see them in action.
And the public would know, holy crap, so-and-so wasn't chosen. They by far were the best candidate in the public's opinion.
Right.
They weren't chosen.
Yeah.
The way it's done now, nobody knows.
That's certainly
and again,
one thing.
Transparency.
I also think there has to be an amendment to the city charter. They have to push some kind of legislation where you can't put yourself in a situation where only the council votes for the replacement, or at least in the assent, or how about this? Perhaps have a caveat in which, in the event of a tie or a deadlock, somebody from the mayor. I mean, we have a strong mayoral system, so it's kind of surprising that the mayor doesn't have a role in that. But that would solve a lot of this.
Exactly. I think if the council was 3-1 or 4-0 on one particular candidate, then you say, hey, listen,
exactly
clear favorite.
Yep. But I think in the essence of a tie, having some sort of tiebreaker, and why wouldn't you have the mayor at that point? And look, and to be fair, we asked Randy Taylor to come on and talk about this, and his schedule would not allow him. So we did try to have our.
It'll be interesting to see if any other elected officials from the city are going to be willing to talk about this in public in the coming weeks.
Mm-hmm. Well, gentlemen, thank you. We're going to stay on top of this, and it'll be very interesting to see how the December 8th meeting goes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of Open Agenda. We'll be back later this week with another new episode.
I know what I'm doing, man.